We must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. Joseph Campbell. Welcome to EOS Weekly. There were meetings this past week at Block.one's office in Blacksburg, Virginia, to discuss a revamp of EOS Governance. Brendan Bloomer, the CEO of Block.one, was in town from their Hong Kong office to participate in these discussions. Dan Larimer was also in attendance at these meetings. As we discussed in last week's episode, Brendan kicked off the new year with some controversial tweets that have stirred up conversations within the EOS community around the topic of vote buying. It would appear that this was all intentional. What we now know is that those tweets were part of a coordinated effort to roll out a revamped version of EOS Governance. Those tweets were meant to warm the community up to some new ideas. Because the changes to EOS Governance that Block.one is about to propose are not small ones. These are significant changes. Their proposals are being finalized and documented right now in their Blacksburg meetings. And sometime soon, potentially as early as this coming week, Block.one will be making this information public. Once that document is made public, Brendan will be going on the Everything EOS show with our friends Rob and Zach for an interview. This is going to be a must-watch type of interview for anyone interested in following along with EOS. Rob and Zach do a great job of keeping the community informed. Most of you are probably already subscribed to their channel, but if you aren't yet subscribed, we've added the link to the Everything EOS channel below. Be sure to subscribe there so you don't miss this upcoming Brendan Bloomer interview. Now, the good news is that even though Block.one's formal governance suggestions are not yet out, we think we already have a pretty good idea as to what's going to be in that Block.one set of proposals. And that's what we're going to be covering in the rest of our episode here today. But first, we have an important announcement. The referendum system is now officially launched. It is up and running and ready for use. A huge thank you to the block producers involved, especially to EOS Canada and EOS Nation for the work they put into this. Because of the hard work of these block producers, we now have a way to get a true understanding as to how the community feels about any and all issues. Referendum proposals can now be created for the community to vote on. And this is an essential part of EOS Governance. What you see here on EOS Authority's site are the final BP proposals that had to be approved in order for the referendum system to be deployed. And the timing of this couldn't be better. Being that Block.one is about to publicize a set of proposals to revamp EOS Governance, this referendum system has become available to us to feed those proposals out to the EOS community and see which of Block.one's suggestions we want to move forward with and which ones we don't. Because of course, as Brendan emphasizes here, it will be up to the community whether we want to implement the changes Block.one is suggesting. Block.one does have a loud voice, and the community respects their opinion. They are the creators of the EOS software, and they are the largest EOS token holder with roughly 10% of the token supply. But the EOS mainnet is a decentralized entity, spun up and existing outside of Block.one's control. So it'll be up to the community, the token holders, to decide which of Block.one's proposals to move forward with and which to reject. So what we're going to go through now in the remainder of our show here are the set of 6 proposals that we believe will be made by Block.one this coming week. The reason why we have a pretty good idea as to what will be included in Block.one's formal announcement is because Brendan Bloomer made some unusual guest appearances in one of the EOS Telegram chats over this past week. And he was talking through his viewpoints on EOS Governance pretty extensively. We've already shown some of those Telegram messages from Brendan, but we'll share a whole lot more as we go through these 6 points here so as to back up our predictions. Basically, what's going on here is that Brendan doesn't want us, the EOS community, to be surprised by what's in the upcoming Block.one proposal. He wants us to be mentally prepared for it. As we go through these 6 items, we're going to keep a tally of open questions. Questions that will hopefully be answered in Block.one's formal proposal, but that haven't been clarified just yet. All right, so let's get into this, starting with number 1. Kill the worker proposal system. We've known for a while that Block.one is opposed to having inflation go towards a worker proposal system due to the potential for this fund to be abused. Brendan re-emphasized his stance on this and the reasoning behind it in the Telegram messages that you're seeing here. As we all know, 4% inflation has been going into this EOS.io saving account since the time of launch. This is the fund that was initially being set aside to fund the worker proposals. And being that Block.one is going to be suggesting other governance changes which require funding through inflation, there is a dependency on getting rid of the worker proposal system inflation. This does bring us to our first open question, though. If no worker proposal system, how do we fund public utility projects? We don't know the answer to this yet, but this open question is noted. Number 2. 1-for-1 voting. This is the biggest revelation coming out of Brendan's recent Telegram chats. He is advocating that we move from the current model, where 1 token can be used to vote for up to 30 BPs, to a model where 1 token can only be voted towards a single BP. With this proposal, you can still vote for more than 1 BP, but the multiplier is taken away. This is not to be confused with 1 person, 1 vote, where we'd try to somehow identify individual people through biometrics or some other means and give equal voting power to all individuals. That's not what Brendan is saying. What Brendan is saying is 1 token, 1 vote. It's the same model we described a few weeks ago when we were looking at the EOS Force model. And by the way, it's really strange that Brendan hasn't mentioned EOS Force by name yet. He's clearly describing the exact voting model that EOS Force is currently using. And being able to point to another chain that is already using this model so that we could examine it more closely as an example of what he's proposing would have a lot of benefits. Now, obviously, Brendan has to be careful with his words, being the position he's in as the CEO of Block.one. He doesn't want to cause some sort of mass migration from the EOS mainnet to EOS Force by praising the governance of a sister chain. We did ask Brendan in the middle of these Telegram chats why he hasn't mentioned EOS Force by name yet, but when he didn't respond to our question, we didn't pursue this further. Hopefully our friends Zach and Rob will be able to ask Brendan about this during their upcoming interview on Everything EOS. The idea behind 1 token, 1 vote is that it lessens whale influence and voting collusion. Ultimately, it's another step towards making the chain as cartel resistant as possible. We have it as the second item on our list here because there are upcoming items that have a dependency on this 1-for-1 voting being in place first. It doesn't seem like the code changes would be difficult for this feature, but there will be some things to figure out in terms of the migration. Let's add that to our open questions list, how to migrate existing 1 for 30 votes to 1-for-1 votes. Hopefully Block.one will have thought this through already and include it in their formal announcement. Number 3, a longer staking period. Before the EOS mainnet launched back in June, there were discussions of having a much longer staking period. We ended up going with a relatively short 3-day staking period, meaning that once you stake your tokens for resource usage and voting, there is a 3-day delay for you to unstake those tokens and have the ability to transfer them out of your account. With staking, you're committing to having your tokens in the system for a certain amount of time. Here, Brendan is suggesting we have longer staking periods. Back before the EOS mainnet launched, staking periods of months in duration were under consideration. This will be one of the elements in Block.one's governance proposals, longer staking periods. We don't know how long they're going to suggest, but Block.one has had time, and they definitely have the resources to research what might be the optimal duration for the staking period. Let's add that to our open question list. How long of staking period? The idea behind increasing the staking period is that it lessens the influence of exchanges, being that they need a certain amount of liquidity. And it also ensures that all voters are committing to the health of the network for a greater amount of time. So voters will need to think a bit more long-term about their investment when voting. Like our previous item, this longer staking period sounds like a fairly easy change from a coding perspective. But again, we'll have to figure out the migration side of things. For all the tokens that are already staked, can we just increase the staking period on the token holders? It might not be that simple. So this is another migration we'll need to figure out. Plus, this also has dependencies on upcoming changes, which is why we've got it here at number 3. Number 4. Rex Sans 21. A lot of us thought that Rex was going to be one of the first things we voted on once the referendum system was ready, which, as we mentioned earlier, it now is. The Rex code is nearly complete, and the community is overwhelmingly in favor of it. So the Rex proposal would easily pass, assuming a good enough voter turnout. But the Block.one proposals are going to throw a wrench in these plans. There are dependencies where it'll make sense to implement the one-for-one voting prior to Rex, as Brendan says here in this Telegram message. This is why we have Rex as number 4 in our list after the one-for-one voting and the longer staking period. Rex has dependencies on both of these items. And currently, the requirement for Rex is in place such that you have to vote for at least 21 BPs. But Block.one has changed their stance on the 21 vote minimum. They're likely going to suggest that you only need to vote for 1 or more BPs instead of 21 or more in order to participate in Rex. Or there is the possibility that they'll remove the Rex voting requirement altogether, being that there will be other, more powerful incentives to vote outside of Rex, as Brendan says in his message here. And this leads us nicely into our next item, number 5. The voter dividend incentive. This is what Brendan led with in his tweets on New Year's Day, as he began warming the community up for all these proposed governance changes. And we've already talked about this idea extensively in the past several shows. But we did get some additional information in the Telegram chats. Brendan threw some numbers out there to give us an idea as to the potential inflation percentages going towards BPs and to voters. His suggestion that you see here would equate to about 60% block rewards going to voters and 40% to BPs. Again, the similarities to what he's proposing and the EOS Force model are uncanny. EOS Force has a 70-30 split. Open question: what's the final recommended voter dividend split between BPs and voters? We put this Block.one proposal at number 5 here because there is a dependency where the first 3 items must be in place before we could do this one. And this is also more controversial than Rex, so will likely take more time for the community to come around to this idea. And finally, we come to number 6. Phase out ECAF. Well, yes, in some ways, ECAF is already being phased out. Going back to the block producer proposals here on the EOS Authority site, there was something that quietly happened on Christmas Day that we haven't covered yet. ECAF attempted to order the BPs to change the keys on this account, and the BPs ignored this ECAF order. Christmas Day was the final day for the BPs to approve this order, and as you can see here, that didn't happen. They let it expire. This was an important milestone in the inevitable demise of ECAF. And Brendan Bloomer's comments this last week here in Telegram only helped to confirm this. Block.one will likely include their stance on ECAF in their governance reboot proposals, which ought to help move things along. The only reason we have this phase out ECAF as number 6 in our list and not earlier is because there is a fairly large number of open cases with ECAF, and we're going to have to figure out what to do with all these open cases. Sheriff from EOS Dublin has been vocal about this topic, and rightfully so. We can't just ignore all these open cases, but what are we going to do with them? It's a bit of a mess. Let's add this to our open questions list. What to do with open ECAF cases. BPs are working on automated, proactive solutions in an effort to help make ECAF obsolete. For example, this lost key solution that these BPs here are currently working on. Lost keys are a major part of the ECAF caseload. And this initiative by EOS New York is another way for us to help make ECAF obsolete. This takes more of a preventative approach as well, putting best practices out there for dApp developers so that the built-in EOS.io permissions are used to manage smart contracts, making it unneeded for BPs to go in with their special powers to modify things. Hopefully these types of initiatives will gain traction and help us in phasing out ECAF. So that's it for our list of 6 items. We'll find out soon enough how well the roadmap we've laid out here maps up with Block.one's governance roadmap. Hopefully their proposal will be out in time for our next episode, and we'll be able to grade how well we did with our predictions here by next week. And hopefully we'll also get some answers to our open questions listed here. That's it for this week's episode. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. We'll help you stay current on EOS as this revolution unfolds. Thanks, and we'll see you next week, right here on EOS Weekly.